He asked for a favour to be disconnected, never to be reworked again. He'd rather be nothing. But a very specific Australian author had other ideas. T.R.Napper brings us a new upcoming novel, Alien's Bishop. The story follows Michael Bishop and his resurrection of the synthetic Lance Bishop after his deactivation on Fury 161, during the events of Alien 3, at the hands of his own friend. Bishop becomes a hot potato, and numerous groups seek the valuable xenomorph knowledge stored within his fractured mind. I was lucky enough to get to read an early review copy of the novel, and so today we're going to be doing something slightly different than the data logs that we usually do. We're going to step out of universe for a little while, and here with me on the call we have a very special guest joining us, a fellow Australian and award-winning author of 36 Streets, and the upcoming Aliens Bishop novel, T.R.Napper. Welcome on, my friend.
G'day, good to be here.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. You emailed me a few weeks ago, and we're finally here.
Yeah, I wanted to, because I listened to Project, or I should say watched your channel when I was doing research for the novel, because you go into, and we'll get into this in the interview, you go into some really, really obscure topics, like the Australia Wars. I think you've got a video on the Australia Wars, for example.
Yeah.
That pretty much no one else has really discussed. And all the information is just in these little dribs and drabs all over the place. So you had a couple of really obscure videos that I used. So I wanted the publisher to get you an advanced copy, because in addition to being a good resource for me, you're also an Australian who's working in the or obsessed with the Aliens universe. So yeah. I thought, he's the right person for a review copy.
Yeah, no, well, look, I very much appreciate it. It's the first time I've ever had something like this, so it's a pretty big thing for me, but also just being able to have you on and talk about this upcoming novel with, obviously, my channel, which is obviously smaller than a few of the other Alien channels, but I feel like the people within it are more of these, like, diehard fans, where it's like the videos that I make where they're, you know, as you say, like these very sort of obscure topics, they really appreciate. And I guess it's sort of helped out to a degree with the story as well, which is good. Couldn't have hoped for anything better.
Yeah. No, it was good. And it wasn't just the Australia War, so some others as well. I think you go into the CANC as well. But anyway, we'll talk more about that as the interview proceeds.
Yeah. Well, I guess the first thing that I wanted to just get into was, but like before we get too far into the book, I was hoping to get to know you maybe a little bit better, like learn about your impact in your craft, like what other works have you done. I didn't really know too much about you before this, obviously because I'm mainly just an Alien guy. But like, what are your interests aside from the Alien universe? What projects have you worked on in the past? And maybe just a little bit about you personally, I guess.
Well, I came to writing a bit later than most. I came to writing in my 30s. I was an aid worker living in and working in throughout Southeast Asia for a decade before I came to writing. And so I lived in Vietnam for 3 years, and I lived in various other countries for several years. And so when I came to writing, I started with, and I still write, I should say, cyberpunk. My writing career started with me. I think this is good advice for any aspiring writer: is just take all the things you love and mush them together.
Yeah. Okay.
And so the things I loved were, well, it was my fascination with that part of the world, obviously, but also I'm a huge cyberpunk fan. Movies like Ghost in the Shell and Blade Runner and so forth were very big influences on me. A big science fiction fan in general, and we can get to my obsession with the movie Aliens as well a bit later.
Yep.
And so when I started writing, I just combined the element. The advice that you get when you start writing is write the book you want to read. So what did I want to read? I wanted to read something set in either Australia or Southeast Asia. I wanted to read something with high octane action, cool tech, mind-bending technology, but also that had some deeper thematic issues that science fiction and cyberpunk can explore, whether it's AI, what it means to be human, whether it's the dehumanizing. This is something cyberpunk does very well, the dehumanizing effects of technology. So I wrote a couple of books that didn't get published, but the first one that got published was 36 Streets, which is a near-future cyberpunk set in Hanoi in the year 2100. I also have a short story collection out as well called Neon Leviathan. So I really only had a couple of works out, and I've got some more books coming out next year, but I really only had a couple of works out when when I got offered the Aliens gig. But I got offered the Aliens gig writing Bishop in part because 36 Streets, the first novel, had done really well critically. So it won all, here in Australia, Maitland won our major awards, which is the Aurealis and Dietmar Awards. So I won both of them.
Yeah, I did have a little look at that. It's pretty impressive stuff.
And I think in retrospect, I didn't realise it at the time, but a couple of people like yourself who are hardcore aliens experts read Bishop, and then they went and read my earlier work, and they said, "Oh man, your work feels like it's set in the aliens universe, but on Earth."
Yeah,
and I think that because I was so heavily influenced by, among other things, Ridley Scott's Alien, I should say Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, and then Ridley Scott, in one of his documentaries, actually, I should say the commentary for Alien, sorry, I'm getting my movies mixed up here.
Oh, it's all right. It's easy to do.
In Ridley Scott's commentary for Blade Runner, I should say, he talks about how he imagined the crew of the Nostromo when they returned from, their several months out, truckers in space, at the end of their shift, when they returned home, he imagined them returning home to the Blade Runner city in that movie.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why, because of the influence on me of that movie and in turn the influence Blade Runner has had on all cyberpunk. It's a visionary movie by Ridley Scott, which has in some ways shaped the cinema aesthetic for certain types of science fiction. I think that's why there's this unintentional connection with my original work in the Aliens universe.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I guess that sort of leads into something else I wanted to talk about, which is becoming more apparent for me now, is what was your introduction and origins to the Alien universe, and how has that obviously influenced works that you've gone on to create?
Well, the key one, the important influence is the guy, the visionary, Ridley Scott. In his first couple of films, he makes Alien and then Blade Runner back to back, amazing. But my other introduction was when I was very young, and in the front of the book, I dedicated to my uncle, the Alien Bishop novel, and I dedicated to him because Aliens came out, and I was too young to see it. But I had an uncle who was a sci-fi nut who kept bloody talking about it, and he would go on and on about this Aliens film. And every time I saw him as a little kid, I'm like, "Tell me about the Aliens film." And he'd do more descriptions of colonial marines and smart guns, all I had was him describing the movie to me. But eventually, I think I managed to convince my parents to buy me the tie-in novel, the Aliens, Alan Dean Foster tie-in novel. And I read that. So my introduction was a tie-in novel. So it was kind of cool, 30 years later. Geez, more now. Yeah, it's more.
Yeah. I think we're closing on what?
We're heading towards 40 years later,
exactly,
aren't we?
Yeah.
When I was looking, what I had was, I had that tie-in novel. And all these decades later, I get to write a tie-in novel. That's got one of the same characters.
Yeah.
Or that stars the same character in the movie that I was obsessed with. So that was my introduction, was the tie-in novel. Then, of course, my first film was Aliens. And then after that, I kind of went in order from Alien and then on and on and on and on. But my introduction was certainly, and because I think that was my first experience in the universe, it certainly stuck with me the most and formative in terms of my appreciation of the universe. So yeah, Aliens is certainly still number one for me.
Yeah, it's always interesting. It's sort of there's three groups when I talk to most people. It's either they're an alien, like their genesis is alien, their genesis is aliens, or they've found something in the middle and they've sort of they can't decide between either. But no, I experienced the same thing that your uncle put you through, that terrible torture of not being able to watch the film when you're too young.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So, in this book, obviously, we're going to, just to sort of to the listeners too, most of this is going to be non-spoilers. Obviously, we don't, the book's not out, and we also don't want to ruin anything for you guys. So we will be talking in sort of vagaries and generalities. But in the book, it's no secret, I guess, that there's probably going to be Australian tie-ins, Australian characters. There's also some characters from Vietnam and that come from more of like the UPP or CANC background. I guess, like, what inspired these characters for you other than, I guess, you being an Australian yourself, and how do you identify with them in the story?
I think, so first and foremost, of course, it's a Bishop novel. And so, and in fact, it's in a way, the way the brief was given to me, they said, we want you to write a Bishop novel where Michael Bishop, his creator, wakes him up. So Bishop asked to be deactivated in Alien 3, but Michael takes what's left of his corpse. And then afterwards, the idea is, well, he's reactivated. So, of course, as a writer, creatively, it's like, why? Why does Michael Bishop need the synthetic alive? What does he need from him? And it turns out it's this vital information he's got stored in his mind. How do the other characters come about? Well, again, that's probably what I referred to at the very start of this interview, where I said, write the book. It's two things. It's write what you love and write the book you want to read. And so what's fascinating for me in the Aliens universe is there's these really obscure events that aren't really talked about that much. So you don't, when I say write what you love, it doesn't mean when you get a tie novel you can do whatever you want. You cannot. You have to write within the bounds of this intellectual property, and in this case, Aliens. What exists within the bounds of Aliens would I be good at writing and that I would be passionate about writing? And as you know, because you've done a video for on Project ACHERON, the Australian Wars are part of the Aliens universe, but they're also part of the Aliens universe that are are not very well known, that are kind of footnotes. So I wanted to tease out a little bit more of the Australia Wars. Now, it's not an Australia Wars novel, it's a Bishop novel, and there's an Australian character who has some flashbacks to some events in the Australian rebellion against the Three World Empire. But I wanted that little bit of that in the background. And by the same token, what else? Another really fascinating part of the Aliens universe is because when you do one of these projects, you get this essentially an encyclopedia of the history of the Aliens universe that the publisher puts together. But you also get this really cool map, and I think the map's publicly available. And there's the map of the Middle Heavens. And one of the things I found fascinating was China had its own empire. It had this whole tendril of space where it had multiple colonies and all this, and they were an galactic imperial nation, and they lost it all in the Dog Wars, and then they got absorbed into the UPP. So this is a fascinating part of the history of the Aliens universe, this big player losing an empire. Again, it's about Bishop. It's not about the Dog Wars, but that's there in the background too, and that's motivating. So you have three factions trying to get the knowledge in Bishop's head, trying to get Bishop. The Colonial Marines, there is Michael Bishop, and there is the Chinese through the UPP. Now, the Vietnam becomes involved. I don't want to give too much away, but Vietnam is kind of the younger brother, and sometimes a neglected younger brother, little brother in the UPP, and they get something happens to a Vietnamese smuggler ship and their crew, which brings them into the plot. And so I wanted to, of course, center Bishop, but I wanted in the background to be some cool events in the Aliens universe that I knew that I could write well, and that I knew that I would be passionate about writing, and then integrate those all in together. So I was giving the reader what they'd expect in an Aliens novel, but also some new dimensions that they could also get excited about or get into or explore.
Yeah. Well, look, I think you did a really good job at that. Like, I really appreciate that whilst, as you say, this is a Bishop story, the whole story is centered around the android, but I do really appreciate as someone who's a little bit more, just a law nut, that there's a lot of EU terminology. There's a lot of things that it's a universe that feels lived in, that feels like it's been through a lot. I think that's translated well onto the pages, because I know there's a lot of other alien media where sometimes they'll try and pull something from the larger EU and it doesn't really come across well. It seems forced, whereas I feel like this was a lot more smooth transition into just, look, here's this thing and this is why it is the way it is. Actually, like, probably with the main colonial marine character that we follow, I really like the reasons why she is in the spot that she's in, and like why she's there and why she isn't. Probably some fans would assume, obviously she's Australian, that she would be with one group, but she's not. She's actually with another. She's with the colonial marines, and there's a really good reason as to why that is in the book, which I really liked. So yeah, really good job with that. I guess the one other thing I wanted to talk to about as well with characters in the book is Michael Bishop himself. So obviously fans were a little bit split with him in Alien 3. People couldn't really decide or wrestle with the fact of whether he was a synthetic or a human. I think there's a really interesting play on that in this book. I like the way that you've sort of not solved the problem, but given both fans sort of what they want.
Yeah. To your earlier point about the characters, you can't just shoehorn. I don't think you can just shoehorn characters into this universe, because I think the Aliens readership, there are more general fans, of course, but I think for the sort of fans that really get into the books, and there's a lot out there, they won't accept, and rightfully so, they won't accept just shoehorning in characters, or they'll roll their eyes. You really need to justify it. You really need to show those. It needs to flow organically, if I can use that term, from the universe, and then it flows into the novel. And then if you can do all that, then people just get absorbed. Then the reader suspends disbelief, and they just fall into the novel. Now, as for the Michael Bishop, is he an android? Isn't he an android? I know there's debates going on about that. It is. I do tell you straight out in the book what he is, and I don't think this is a spoiler to say he's a guy.
Yeah,
however,
definitely.
But and this is just when I was doing the research, because I looked at all the debates and I talked to someone that was either, I think it must have been in the studio. I'm not sure I should say the publisher. I'm like, because you always have to go back. They have law experts you have to go back to every now and again to just check that everything you're doing is consistent and fits in the universe properly. And I'm like, Michael Bishop's, he's just a guy, right? And they're like, yeah, that's canon. He's not a synthetic. But, however, what you're alluding to is anyone who's into that debate, anyone who likes the conspiracy theories or theories around Michael Bishop is going to love something that I've put into this book, because in a way it solves one, but in another way it generates 100 more. So
Yeah.
on that, on those grounds, I think it's solved or not solved is what I'll say too. You have to read the book to find out, but it's both solved or not solved that mystery.
Yeah. Oh, look, I definitely can't wait to the release day because I will be making a video on the very specific sort of scene as soon as possible because I can't wait to see the comment section.
It's only a few days now, actually. It's because, and we're doing this on the a couple of days before it's released. So even this interview might come out on release day, maybe even.
Yeah, well, it shouldn't take too long. So once I get it all sorted, I'll get stuck into editing it pretty quick. I'm gonna get it out before release day, and then I want to try and have maybe a review ready for release day, so that I can get all my my spoiler energy out of me. But yeah, like obviously synthetics. Synthetics are the antithesis of the book. I like some of the things that were played around with. Like, I feel like synthetics, even though they're such a big part of the alien universe, they often weirdly take a back seat in a lot of EU stuff. Like, it's sort of like, oh, well, we have a synthetic, and that's him, and he's a robot. Whereas, like, I feel like in this novel, there are a lot of different types of synthetics. There is a lot of different types of synthetics that operate very differently. And sort of coming back to, I guess, the thing with the scene that shall not be named with Michael Bishop, there's a aftermath of it that has one synthetic that has to try and grapple with what it's just witnessed. And I really like that synthetic, like, it's trying to process this situation. It gets stumped. So, when it's getting given orders by the Marines, it's actually like missing the orders, and they actually have to bark an order at him to get him to kick into gear. It's like there's a lot of interesting play with how synthetics' minds work and why they work a certain way that I think was really fun in this novel, and obviously plays into the bigger, I guess, plot point of Bishop. For a human, I guess the morality of not giving out information about the xenomorph to just anyone is that we don't want our planet or we don't want our society to crumble. Whereas Bishop's, it's sort of that because of programming, but it's like, I don't know, there's this really interesting play with them trying to overcome their programming or them trying to, something like that. I don't know how to put it into words, but I really liked that in the novel. It was an interesting thing to explore.
Yeah, no, he's got, well, I mean, I don't think it's in the first few pages of when you read Bishop, but he's got a bunch of military secrets in his mind, but the Colonial Marines have, as part of synthetics that have to work for the Colonial Marines, actually part of their mind can be shut off and firewalled in order to protect those military secrets. So that's a really important. It happens very early on. It's not a spoiler, I don't think. But there is a broader question, exactly, what I did really think about a lot in the novel and try to explore through more than one synthetic is this idea of programming versus free will, and whether what it means to be sentient or what it means to be human. And Bishop struggling within himself. Does he count? Is he a person he desperately wants to be, but is it all programming? And he meets his maker as well. He meets Michael Bishop, and Michael Bishop has very strong opinions on this, and that impacts Bishop's thought process as well. And so it's very difficult to. It's not very difficult. It's a really welcome challenge when you're writing science fiction and when you're writing in this universe where you get to have a sentience that's not quite human, so it doesn't quite think like us, but desperately wants to be considered to belong and to have their own identity. So with Bishop, I wanted to document his struggles, and I wanted him to have an ambiguity within himself, and whether only programming or whether he's more. But I also wanted to look at there's another synthetic that works with the Colonial Marines. There's another twin synthetics that work with Michael Bishop, and they are all distinct characters as well, distinct personalities as well, with different priorities. But one of the issues in the book is the Marines have that motto, no one left behind, right? And so the Marines are trying to get Bishop, and some of them are like, well, we don't leave anyone behind, and Bishop's one of us. And other Marines are saying, no, he's not. He's a bloody robot. Why are we going through all of this?
Yeah, risking our neck for this basically tin can.
Yeah, why are we risking our necks for a tin can? So that goes into how Bishop's perceived as well. And the fact that, he struggles with the fact that he's a product. Like, there's not just one Bishop walking around. There are what? Hundreds?
Yeah.
Thousands?
Well, we see a couple across the EU, right? Like, they pop up all the time. Like, there's ones in the other novels, there's ones in the comics. So it's like, I like that he does have to struggle with that sense that he's not the only Bishop. But in the same sense, he is probably one of the only actual Bishops to meet the Michael Bishop. So then there's an extra layer of struggle added onto his self-identity there, basically.
Yeah, and what's interesting about it, because I did a lot of research, as you would imagine, but I got the Colonial Marine technical manual, and I also read some of there's a really good short story. There's not much of Bishop out there, but there's a really good short story in, Bug Hunt, which is the short story collection.
Yep.
From the universe, although that's not considered canon. But synthetics are often very young, and Bishop's only 2 or 3 years old. So another added complication within his struggle for identity is he's super intelligent, he has a superhuman memory and processing power, and yet he's also incredibly naive at the same time and has an almost naive approach to human motivation, human nature. So he has all these exceptional senses and insight into certain things like alien physiology, for example, and yet he can't have a conversation with someone and read some obvious cues that you and I would get just from we're walking around in this world for a few decades. So that's another contradiction within the Bishop character is he doesn't know himself whether he's programmed or if he has free will, but he is also young and naive, so he can't read the people around him. Is he being manipulated? Can he trust them? He wants to trust them. I think if you look at the Bishop character from Aliens, it's definitely someone who wants to belong. It's someone who wants to be seen as an equal. There's a couple of moments where we have our doubts about Bishop, but he's also someone that comes through and does maybe one of the most terrifying things in that film is go through that bloody pipe.
Yeah, it's super claustrophobic.
Squeezing along. And of course I wanted to reflect on that as well. Bishop cares very much about his past and his friends and all his friends that died at Hadley's Hope. So he's struggling with their memory as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's a good question of like what Bishop actually, like, he obviously needs to remember the events on Acheron for the reason of, pleasing his maker or giving the Colonial Marines the information that they want, but he also wants to remember it because of, or seems like he wants to remember it because of the experiences that he knows that he had with people there, but he doesn't have any memory of that anymore. And I think that's a very interesting thing to play with, is like, is he giving up, or would he be revealing this information again because of something he's programmed to do, or is it something that he wants to do? Because I know there's a part in the novel where Michael Bishop basically tries to get some information out of him, and the result is Bishop almost looking for a way not to give it to him. Like, and it makes sense why he didn't, because obviously there's certain protocols in place as to why he can't divulge that information. But to me, it also felt like he didn't want to give up the information. It was a conscious choice he was making, not just something like he probably could have given the information if he wanted to. Is more what I'm trying to say.
Look, he has split loyalties. His loyalties are split between the Marines, and he sees himself as a Marine, and his maker. How do you say no to your maker? How do you say this is, in a sense, his father? Yeah. This is his surrogate father. This is the closest thing he has to a, if you can use this term, blood relative. So it is invidious for Bishop in this situation, this choice that he's kind of given. This, what becomes an increasingly clear choice between his loyalty to the Marines and his admiration, respect for his father as well. So that's another contradiction within Bishop that was cool to have the opportunity to explore.
So in the novel, what I like about it, as opposed to some of the other, even colonial marine or action-centered alien novels that I've read before, is I think the combat feels really realistic and visceral. So, like, I guess when I was reading it, it's sort of like, I guess, that classic thing of show, don't tell, right? I felt like I was experiencing in my head a lot more vivid a picture of the combat that was going on as compared to a lot of other materials that I've read, which, I guess my question of that is, like, how did you achieve that? Like, what sort of techniques do you use to make that combat feel real?
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. The writing action is hard. And a lot of, even in good books, I read bad action scenes. And what you have to remember about action scenes is it's not clinical. You don't, unless you're writing first person omniscient, but if you're in a battle, it's not clinical. You don't see everything that's happening. You don't, and things don't even move at normal speed. If you or if any of your listeners think about something in their life when they were in a fight, they were in a car accident, anything that is visceral and even traumatic, your memory of it and your experience of it is not like when you're walking around in the world. You get hyper-focused. Sometimes you don't feel injury. Sometimes sounds, sensations are exaggerated. You might be in a fight, for example, and the fight's over, and then you realize, oh, I've got a blood nose. How did that happen? So the body, and when you write an action scene, you've got to remember that it's not something that you can experience objectively. It's a very subjective experience, and the reader has to experience that too. So in combat, it's confusing. You don't always know what's happening. You don't always know who's shooting at you. You don't know where all of your, the book opens with a cool combat scene. You don't know where all the enemy are. You've got to get into that person's head, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what they smell. And if you can do all that, if you can get into the character's head and understand what it's like to try and replicate what it's like to be in a highly stressful situation, then the reader can transport into the head of the character and experiencing it all. And so and there's quite a bit of action in the book, as you'd expect from an aliens novel.
Yeah.
And we have some colonial marines, so they've got to be doing their thing. That has to be visceral. It has to be experienced at that level, down in your guts. It can't be just like you're watching a screen. Oh, and then the guy comes and he's shooting, and there's people up on the gantry shooting. No, it has to be in the moment. So if the person is feeling terror or fear or anger or rage, you got to feel. The reader feels those things as well, and yeah, those highly stressful experiences like that can be very confusing, and often afterwards, after you've had this experience of, say, combat or whatever it may be, then when you reflect back, you start to realize, oh, and then oh my God, that happened, and then this happened, and I didn't even realize that was happening at the time. So the thing about it's the fog of war, I suppose. In the middle of aside from everything else I've just mentioned, um, for those Marines, for example, in the midst of battle, there's the fog of war, and they're not clear about what everything that's happening on the battlefield. So that's that confusion and that visceral feeling you have to mix that all in together for an action scene. And if you can do that, and it's some cool action, and in Aliens movies and in Aliens books, you get the opportunity to have some really cool action, then that can be quite satisfying for the reader, yeah.
Yeah, because I like going back to that the first sort of fight scene that you were talking about. When I sort of first read that through, it was like I sort of read it. It got to the point where the action started, and I was, I guess, a little confused. I was like, "Oh, hang on, what did I miss something here?" I've gone back, read through it again, and then realized, oh no, I'm supposed to be confused. The Colonial Marines are confused. Like that's the point. And then I was like, oh, this is actually really good. I feel like I'm there with the character, and everything seemed to progress. Like, yeah, I guess I'll probably just say without stroking egos too much that I really appreciated the way that combat felt realistic in this. I think it kept me much more engaged, like with the story. Like it wasn't just me just skimming over lines looking for the next bit of lore, which is what I usually do with stories. I was like, oh no, this is fun. This is like I want to feel every movement. I like when the dog catches, throw a leash on you. Oh, like it nearly feels like it's on you, you know.
Well, thank you for saying that. That was certainly my intent with those. Whenever I do an action scene, is that sort of reaction.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. So I guess one little fun thing I wanted to ask you is, do you have a favorite out of all the aliens in all of the Alien universe? Do you have a favorite type? Favorite type of xenomorph variant, or maybe even not a xenomorph, maybe just like an off-brand alien or something like that?
Oh man, I'm bored. I'm old school, man. Like I'm kept up with all the new versions and the new variants, but isn't the original terrifying enough? Isn't it the perfect organism? Like, I mean, the original xenomorph. I mean, of course, the Queen is spectacular when you see that at the end of Alien, and she's sitting there amongst the eggs, and she's got her what do they call the Praetorian?
Yeah, the guards.
Near her. So that's spectacular. But how can you think about that? Because when you start writing, when you write an aliens novel, you look into all the, as you say, all the variants out there, and you're like, oh, should I use a variant? Should I invent a new one? And so that was all running through my mind, but I also, in a way, wanted to. It also fits with the timeline too. So the timeline is not. A lot of the Aliens Expanded Universe novels are set a bit further, about 5 or 6 years after the events of this, whereas this one's set straight after Alien 3. But although of course there's all the prequels and they have all the weird types as well.
Yeah.
But I'm old school. Like, I like in the life cycle that we saw in Aliens, the Overmorph, the Facehugger, the Chestburster, the Xenomorph, the Queen. I'm down for all that, and you can do so much, like, creatively, even though it seems to have been done to death. Even with that life cycle, there's so much horror you can inflict on characters, and terror that you put the reader through. So I'm I'm satisfied with the original, man. What about you? Do you have a particular favourite on all the different types?
Yeah, look, I'm going to be a bit boring as well. Like, I've always said that Big Chap from the first film, he's my favourite. Like, just a drone, a basic drone, because, to me, it's the epitome of evil. Like, it's just biological disaster in a shell. I don't think it has to be anything more than that. And it really does come down to storytellers to go, cool, this is the perfect organism. And I can craft a story around it that is terrifying and horrific without needing to resort to, and this one glows, or this one can swim really well. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Like, I always do appreciate when, like, don't get me wrong, I love all the variants. I wouldn't be without them. But I do like when, like, obviously, creators can take just your stock standard xenomorph and make it terrifying, because that's really, in essence, what it should be, I guess.
Yeah, it's primal. It embodies this primal form of terror, and like visually, so the aesthetics of the xenomorph are extraordinary. It's just this demonic, refined, perfect killing machine. And I reckon if you've got that, you can craft some pretty cool scenarios around that kind of creature.
Yeah, definitely. I think, actually, coming off of that, I really like, and it's going to be hard to, I'll have to tiptoe around spoilers with this one, but there's the mercenary or pirate ship that you have in your book.
The smugglers, yeah.
Yeah, the smugglers, yeah. When they get taken off of their ship, they obviously get into a very sticky situation. I sort of combining that with what I said about the combat earlier as well. I really like the fear. Again, me just being sort of like just encapsulated inside of this novel at this point. The fear of there's not really too much going on other than them just scrambling to get out of the situation that they're in. And, the threat is basically like pretty small for them at that time, because they don't really understand what it is that's happening to them. But I don't know, I think that scene in itself just shows that you don't need to do anything crazy special with the xenomorphs. Having them there is enough sometimes if it's well written.
Yeah, we'll have to tiptoe around it. But what happens to that crew? What happens to the Vietnamese crew? And this is for your listeners. Is for me. I'm glad you mentioned it, because I love that scene, or those series of scenes, and I love the claustrophobic terror of it. And and it's, for me, that was a very. Oh, I'm trying to think of a way to talk about it without spoilers.
I know. I was having that same issue.
But look, but for your listeners, there's a Vietnamese crew, and they get put into an awful situation, which is classic Aliens. And I wanted that to recreate the terror of that, of your first xenomorph experience, if you will. So that's what I put into that, because you're in a difficult position as a reader and as a writer in the Aliens universe, because we've seen it all before and we know what happens. But then if you go back to after the end of Alien 3, so Aliens and Alien 3 and then Alien Bishop all take place within really a couple of months, 3 months, say.
Oh yeah, possibly even less.
You're going to be dealing with, like, so for example, the Vietnamese crew. They've never even heard of the xenomorph, never even heard of Rumour. So you have to sort of recreate that first encounter experience, and that's what I worked really hard to do,
yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it pays off as well, just the putting more effort into that part of the novel. So, like, obviously we've talked about, like, all the grand stuff that the novel sort of works with, and, like, you've done a very good job, I think, of putting EU terminology references, making it feel like it's done well and not just shoved down your throat. What, I guess, were the biggest challenges, or what were you, I guess, being cautious of? Because obviously the Alien fandom is one that's at times very unforgiving. So if something brushes them the wrong way, that could be the end of your stint in the Alien universe. They sort of... I don't like that it's this way, but, like, there's a lot of people that don't like the prequels at all. Like, there's just no redeeming factor about them that could ever make them appreciate the films. I, myself, I take in everything. I don't like everything 100%, but most of it, anything Alien, really, I'm sort of on board for. But I know there is that group that you do have to be very careful with. So, like, I guess, what were you trying to be cautious of when you were crafting this story?
To be honest, I didn't think about it. But in part because I didn't know. So it was only as I wrote the novel I began to, because I kind of considered myself I considered myself a big Aliens fan, right? And I'm like, when I had the opportunity, I said, does he like the Aliens universe? I'm like, bloody oath I do. Classic. Absolute classics. And then, but when you get into writing a novel, you're like, oh shit, there's stuff I haven't even looked at. I never played the role-playing game, for example. I hadn't really read many tie novels at all. So when you get into it, you realize, oh shit, this is massive. And so firstly, for me, my concern was it's so overwhelming. There's so much out there. My concern was, firstly, only doing research and only hyper-focusing on all the stuff that was relevant to the time frame of Aliens Bishop. In terms of the... but in terms of the audience, the Aliens audience, I wrote it for a reader, I tried to go as broad as possible. So I wanted to be some hardcore Aliens fandom, if you will, like yourself, would be very satisfied. But I also wanted it to be for people who they love the films, but that's as far as they've gone. And I wanted it to be so they could come to the book as well. And it wouldn't be obscure references, and it wouldn't be like in-jokes and winks and all this stuff. Don't get me wrong, I put a few Easter eggs in there. But
I was going to say, we're not completely devoid of that.
No, I don't get... look, but I didn't want Easter eggs to be a way of, how can I put this, alienating the general reader. I didn't want someone to be reading the book and be going, what's this reference? Who's that? What's going... You know what I mean? I wanted it to be so the general fan could come to it and be like, well, that was pretty fucking cool. So I tried to go, in that sense, I wasn't narrow casting to one part of the Aliens fandom. I was trying to make something satisfying for all of them. And especially insofar as Bishop's beloved, and he's kind of all that's left from Hadley's Hope. And we never really got... I mean, Alien 3 has a lot of admirers out there, and I've been interviewed by a couple of people who say Alien 3 is their favourite of all the films. So I understand that. But for many people, Alien 3 was brutal because it just dispatched all these favourite characters within the first 2 or 3 minutes of the film. So what I wanted, in a way, was to have this sole survivor, if you will, not including clones, sole survivor of Hadley's Hope, and give them a proper third act, and have Bishop think about those friendships and that comradeship that he had, but also give that character, expand on him, and you get to know him better, and you get to put him through hell as you should in an Aliens novel. So my short answer is I didn't really think about, in a way that was anyway fearful about readership. I think that's a bad way to write. I think you don't think about your worst readers, you think about your best readers. And if you ever write in fear of a readership, you probably won't write a good book. You'll be too hesitant. You'll be too focused on fan service. Whereas good books and good movies don't do that, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, because I think I see where you're sort of, like, fearing not to step on anyone's toes will just mean that you get something that's disingenuous, I guess. But yeah, no.
Don't get me wrong. It's also ignorance. Like I again thought I was a big fan, but then when you get into the world, you realize, oh my god,
yeah, this is a lot bigger than I thought.
Compared to the hardcore fans, oh wait a minute.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, so I guess there's another point that I wanted to go over. Obviously, when reading this book and having finished it now, I would probably put it probably one of the top novels and probably one of the top EU materials that I've read or experienced thus far. It's definitely one of the better ones. But what do you think? Because I know what makes this novel different for me. I don't really want to sort of I'll talk about that more in my review, I guess. But what do you think that this novel does differently, or what's special about it, or what do you explore that you think is going to set this apart from something else where a fan would go, okay, cool, I really have to experience this book over another?
I mean, you've probably read more of the time novels than I have. But what I'd say is that I would say that firstly, there's kind of four things that come to mind. One, it takes place after Alien 3 and therefore accepts that Alien 3 exists.
Yeah.
I think Alien, it's canon, man. And so, and even if a lot of fans still don't like that movie, the reality is those events happened and we have to deal with them. And I don't think many of these books, if any, have ever dealt with the fact that the events there on Fury took place. So, firstly, it's kind of, you can see it as almost a triptych of stories with goes Aliens, Alien 3, Alien Bishop. Secondly, I think that, I know this has been done elsewhere, but I really do a deep dive into that question of artificial intelligence, sentience, consciousness, what it means to be human, what it means to belong from the perspective of a synthetic. I haven't read any Aliens books that center. I've read short stories that have, but I haven't read any Aliens novels that have a synthetic as the protagonist. And then the third part, which I think is a bit different, but certainly consistent with the Aliens universe, is this question of empire. And so we have the United Americas Empire. We have the CANC, or I should say the UPP Empire, and we have Weyland-Yutani as an empire, and them clashing. And these empires that seek, this is the background to the novel, but these empires that seek power, resources, knowledge, military power as well, and those clashing over a prize, and that prize is Bishop. And so it explores more the galactic imperial ambitions of many in the Aliens universe. And lastly, from our perspective, Maitland, we get to see a little bit about the Australia Wars, man.
Yeah, definitely.
We get this thing which is kind of cool. When you look into it, there's this big rebellion and it's on all these colonies and it's against the Three World Empire, and we're winning, and it's a really cool subplot, if you will, in the universe that we never even really see much at all. And here again, it's not central to the plot, but it's central to one of the characters' backgrounds, and so she has flashbacks to events, and that's very different as well. So what I wanted to do, it kind of references your previous question about what fans want, or how you deal with fans. Is what I wanted to do is give them what they expected on the one hand, which was Michael Bishop, xenomorphs, but also what they didn't know much about and what was new, which was China, Vietnam, Australia, and empire. and these empires battling there for jockeying for position. So I did want to have that mix of the new and the old.
Yeah, no, well, look, I think it's going to be a really good novel for me to be able to break down across the channel, because there is just so many different things in it that might not be a large part of it, but, you know, again, for someone who covers really niche stuff like what I do sometimes, I think there's probably enough in this novel to sustain the making videos for a long time, because you know, like there's theories that can be crafted from it. I feel like there's other materials that I've read or I've watched, or that sort of, there might be like a bit of a storyline or a little bit of information, but it's sort of just like a sentence, and there's not really much to go into about it. Whereas I feel like I think the way you've crafted the, you know, obviously keeping your main focus, but then having these little extra tidbits that, you know, an average reader is going to enjoy, because that's something I didn't know that was actually even a part of the alien universe. Yeah, what is that group of people doing? Or the lore junkies like myself are just gonna like eat it up, because it's something more we can add to our ever expanding collection of information.
Yeah, I mean, I
feel like there's something for everyone.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, after I finished, I'm like, well, there is, as you say, there's going to be, for the lore junkies like yourself, there's going to be more on the UPP, there's going to be more on Australia. There's also going to be much more on artificial intelligence now, man, and synthetics, I think. So it's really cool. And obviously Bishop, this is the coolest thing. And again, it was really weird that I didn't, in a way, I couldn't believe that I was writing it while I was writing it. But when I finished, I'm like, wait a minute, this is canon.
Yeah.
this is Bishop's story now. Yes. And so I did have that ambition. I want to give him a proper third act. But when it was done, I'm like, cool, that's his third act.
Yeah.
So it was, it's a surreal experience writing in the universe. Absolutely. But yeah, no, back to your point, that it's certainly, I can see how someone like yourself would be like, oh, cool, there's some good stuff here.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that I really enjoyed while I was going through it. And yeah, like, I guess coming towards probably the close of my questions and all that sort of stuff is, do you ever think that you will do something else in the alien universe? Obviously, you can't tell us too much even if you were, but is it something you would like to explore more? And if so, do you have other stories in the alien universe that you'd want to tell?
Yeah, I do. Look, the thing is, I just came across this gig. It was a bit of luck was involved, a bit of skill and a bit of luck was involved in getting the gig. And if a novel goes well, and I think that the publisher and the studio, which I'm very, very happy with the book, and if it goes well, maybe I'll get offered something in the future, maybe not. I think when you do something like this, you've got to treat it as you've got one shot, and you do the best bloody job you can. And I did. I just poured everything into the book. And, you know, you because I care about the universe and I care about this character. So I want it to be awesome. I don't want to phone anything in. Whether other opportunities come from this, who knows, man? I can't answer the question. Say I don't have any other offers, if that's the question. So at the moment, I'm not writing another novel. No, but the book's not out yet. So
yeah.
So I think the publisher, if I was the publisher, I'd probably like, well, let's see how he goes first before we make any other offers.
Exactly. Yeah.
I've thought of a couple more stories. Absolutely. I think that there is potential, even though this book is completely self-contained, I do think there's potential for more stories that emerge from this branch of the expanded universe. But there's also other, because as I said, I got the timeline of the entire Aliens universe when I was when I was, as you get sent to you as part of the research. And in that timeline, there are some really, really cool things. So I certainly have one other thing that I'm not going to mention it because I don't know if I'm ever going to get another gig. But I'll mention after the recording. I might tell it to you. But there is there's one really cool event in the aliens lore that I'm like, I'd like to write that. So I have 2 book ideas in answer to your question. I'm not writing another one. My assumption is that this is it. And as I said, I just wanted to do the best job I possibly could on Bishop because, this is a story from my youth. This was a very formative influence on me when I was very young. This movie, and in fact, the tie novel was my introduction, as I said. So I just wanted to do a worthy sequel.
Yeah, no, 100%. And look, I think if that's what you set out to do, I think you've done it well. I think that the Alien universe is better for having Aliens Bishop in it. It's definitely something that, anyone listening now, as soon as the release day comes, what is the release day? Is the 6th or...
Well, thank you. It's the 5th. It's the 5th for the hard copy and the ebook.
Yep.
5th of December. The 12th of December for the audio book, which has 7 narrators on it, man. So,
which is one of the first times that they've done something like that for Alien. Like, I've read all the books. I've listened to all the audiobooks. I was super excited to see the amount of voice actors that were on this one. It's going to be a crazy experience for me to even just go back and listen to the audiobook this time because there's going to be so many actors as a part of it, which is great.
Yeah, I don't usually listen to audiobooks, but especially my own. But 7 actors, I'm like, I have to listen to this because I'm just really curious about the job they've done and who's got which role and all that sort of stuff. So I'm pretty excited about that, yeah. But look, thank you for your kind words.
Yeah, no, it's very, in my opinion, very much well earned. I think you've done a fantastic job. Obviously, you'll be able to hear my unabridged and opinions when my review comes out and all that sort of stuff. This is the first time I'm actually going to be doing a review for an Alien piece of media or anything like that, which is it's going to be different.
Oh, okay.
I've never done one before, so this novel has inspired me enough to actually put in the effort and actually get my ass into gear and actually do it.
Great! That's great to hear, mate. Thank you.
No, that's okay. But yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up everything I wanted to talk about. Obviously, I think it's a great novel. Obviously, everyone, it's going to be coming out sort of 5th or 6th, depending on where you are located in the world. Us Aussies usually are lucky enough to get things early, which is great. But yeah, I would very much suggest go and check it out. I'm going to be covering the book super extensively on this channel. Going into all the little bits and pieces. So from this point on, basically spoilers beware. But yeah, no, look, thanks so much for coming on, man. This is the first time second time. I did an interview with Clara a while ago. I think you know Clara too. And
yeah. Well, so for your listeners, Clara's the global lore expert on aliens, and so you have to get the book through 3 people or groups when you finish your manuscript. It has to get through the studio, which is kind of the toughest, the publisher, but also Clara, and so she has to make sure everything is consistent.
Yeah, she's like a gatekeeper.
Yeah, she is. Yeah.
And I always try and basically try and supersede her knowledge on stuff, and then she comes back to me and makes me feel like an idiot. So she's definitely very good at what she does.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, look, I really appreciate you coming on, man. You'll have to forgive me for any unprofessionalisms. This is obviously a first time and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, no, it was really fun talking to you, man, and I'm really excited to see this novel come out, see its reception, cover it, and see what you've got planned for the future, and look into your other works, I think, too, now.
Oh, fantastic. Well, look, thanks for having me on. It's been... don't apologise for anything. It's been a good conversation.
Yeah, I know, like, listeners aren't going to know this specifically until this point, but my Zoom cut out halfway through, so I did have to do a full reconnect and get that back up and operational, I will admit that. But yeah, no, look, you've been super good, man. You're an awesome dude to talk to. So, yeah, if you ever want to talk alien lore again, you know who to come to.
I do, man. I'll be sending, if I get another gig, I'll be sending you emails.
Yeah, I'll be very enthused to respond to them.
All right, thanks, mate.
Nah, thanks, man. I really appreciate it, and you have a good rest of your day.
You too.
If you really want to support what we do here and gain a bunch of awesome rewards, consider joining as a Project ACHERON channel member like company representatives, the Sith Lord 906, Lewis Perkins, Jack Fleming Jr. and Scott Jardine, or like our team members, Raunchy, Ambrosia and Vladimir Chernikov. But until next transmission, this is Project ACHERON bringing the knowledge and the power directly to you.